So I actually started talking to myself about what I thought the best and worst expansions of WoW were, and I thought, why don't I just do a video on this? Like, does it actually hurt to just throw out a video like this? I mean, why not? So we're gonna do it. Here we are, World of Warcraft expansion tier list maker, on TierMaker, of course. The best and worst World of Warcraft expansions, and we will dictate what is what today. Now, as you can see down here, can I zoom in, by the way? This is so tiny, I can zoom in. Okay, we have, oh god, BFA, Cataclysm, Legion, Mr. Pandaria, Burning Crusade, Vanilla, Warlords of Draenor, Wrath of the Lich King. There's no Shadowlands here, and there's also, what the hell? Can I add something? So there's like a bunch of different options. That was the first one I found. Here's a Shadowlands one, but I really do want Dragonflight in here. Okay, here's what we'll do. At the end, what I'll do is I'll just tell you where I would currently put Dragonflight, okay? But we're starting up all the way to Shadowlands, and I want to go from like a chronological order, let's just say, from Vanilla all the way to Shadowlands, right? We have best expansion, runner-up to the best expansion, a decent expansion, an okay expansion, a bad expansion, and a dog shit expansion. Shit tier, one might even say. Let's start with Vanilla WoW. Now, Vanilla WoW, you can see it right here. Best, runner-up, decent, okay, bad, worst. Vanilla WoW, in my opinion, as somebody who played not really in the original Vanilla, but I played private servers, I played classic WoW, I think that it's one of the better expansions, if you can call it that has ever existed. But let's talk about strengths and weaknesses, right? So Vanilla WoW has the best leveling experience of every single expansion. It has a community feeling. The dungeons are actually difficult. The gear you acquire is interesting. You log in and you're like, yo, I've been playing for 6 days and I'm only level 29. And you're like, how the fuck? But you know what I mean? Like, it's interesting. It's fun. It makes you feel connected. You do feel like you're in the world of Warcraft. It's a world. It's the original concept of an MMO in many ways. I mean, WoW, after this expansion, if you can call it that once again, really wasn't an MMO anymore, really. I mean, it was just a dungeon and battleground and arena simulator. That's all you did, really, in raiding. In Vanilla WoW, it was still a world. It was still big and massive, and you would actually just log in and, like, play with friends you met, and that's all you would do. You know, you'd go to the inn, you'd go to Moonguard, you'd ERP with a gnome, like a 50-year-old guy on a female night elf as well. Like, all sorts of stuff would happen. So, personally, I really enjoyed that version of WoW. I have a lot of memories. I don't want to say that it never existed in an expansion other than Vanilla, because I mostly played in Wrath, and I had all the same feelings back in Wrath. In many ways, it died after Wrath, right? That's where the world truly died. So, I think you have to give Vanilla bonus points, because I currently think it's the only way to play World of Warcraft that truly encompasses that in-world feel, because even if you go to a private server for TBC or Wrath, people just rush to max. Nobody cares about the leveling experience. I mean, it doesn't mean people aren't there because it's not slow. It is slow, right? But nobody cares. And that's a big difference, because in Vanilla, most people do care, which is why after phase 1 and 2, so many people quit in Classic, because nobody cares about raiding. Who would have thought? In a game in which raiding is not the point, and adventure is the point. Personally, I think Vanilla is easily the best expansion of all time. I'm just gonna be real. You take everything, you take atmosphere, you take the fact that it felt like an actual MMO. The only bad thing about Vanilla is that they moved on to Burning Crusade. If they had kept Vanilla, if they had tried to reinvent the wheel and not make it expansion based, if they had gone for like a Vanilla Plus even back then, if we had seen Hyjal and Uldum, if we had seen the Twilight Highlands and what was added in Cataclysm but in the original world, if we had seen High Elves back then, it would have just been the best game literally of all time. And you know what? In a different parallel universe, that's exactly what's happening right now. And you just don't get to experience it, right? But hey, to me, that's a pretty good place to start. So let's go on to Burning Crusade. Oh my god, where is it gonna be, you know? Burning Crusade's one of those things that before I went back and played it again, because I did theoretically start in TBC, I started on private servers as like an 11-year-old, and I don't even know how I really got to doing it, but that's what happened. And you know what? I never actually played the Outland version of it when I was in TBC. I was like playing vanilla in TBC, right? So I had all these like interesting ideas about what I thought Burning Crusade was. I thought it was an incredibly good expansion. I liked the idea of Shattrath. I love Hellfire Peninsula personally. I always have. But when I went back and played it, both on private servers and WoW Classic TBC, I actually ended up hating it. I thought the leveling experience was a dulled down version of Classic. I think it's because the player base changed. Obviously, in its heyday, it would have been different. I'm judging it based on how I feel now, though. So in a lot of ways, it was just like a crappier experience from 1 to 60 because there were less people and nobody cared about it anymore. The game had changed. People wanted to go to max level now. That was the only thing people cared about. They wanted to do the heroic dungeons now. The grind had begun at max level. Nothing you did while leveling mattered at all. It was just a whole different thing. I do think it was the beginning of the end. Personally, Burning Crusade for me is just kind of meh. It's not really decent, I guess. I guess it's decent because what we're going to talk about after Wrath is just not that great, right? So I'll give Burning Crusade decent. The world probably wasn't too bad in the time, like I said, but you know, nowadays the world is basically dead. Level 70 is a grind fest. It's a crazy grind fest. Everything is a 10-year grind, right? Even just getting into heroics is boring to me. It's so boring having to farm out the attunements and stuff like that. It's way less fun to me. And I thought the vanilla grind was actually interesting. It wasn't interesting, it was fun. It wasn't necessarily fun, it was doable, and it was just, I don't know, it felt right. Like, I did all of it in Classic WoW. You know, I actually didn't care at all. Nothing was that bad, you know? But Professions and all of those OG expansions are all kind of mad. It's basically engineering. Overall, for me, I'd have to give it a decent, you know? It was just fine. It was just fine. I had a lot of fun PvPing on my rogue and stuff like that, but it was just fine. The arena balance was garbage and stuff like that. I think decent is pretty good. We might amend this as we go on, but I think decent's pretty good. Now, Wrath of the Lich King. Bro, we have Wrath Classic right now. I played Wrath Classic. I've done all the way up to Nax 10, 25, all that jazz. Got the gear, got everything. Quit the game, right? Waiting for Ulduar. I think it's either come out or it's on its way to coming out. But a lot of people are feeling down about Wrath. Listen, nobody can deny that that 1 to 80 experience, the grind, the tabards, the reputation, the PvP is extremely fun. But some things have definitely been jaded over time with the way that humans are in the gaming sphere today. And you see that so prevalently with World of Warcraft Classic that it becomes depressing. Because I almost wish they never released it just so we could remember how it was and not now have to remember how it is. First of all, PvP on Wrath Classic is disgusting. You know, I remember the meta back then, but I remember playing Ellie Shaman with my Frost Mage friend, and we one-shot everybody all the time. I don't know if I could do the things I used to do back then, you know? I don't think I could do anything that I used to do back then. It's so intensely sweaty and therefore intensely class-based and therefore so obviously imbalanced. That's the problem, right? It's like it's so imbalanced. Like on Dragonflight right now, so many classes are viable, and I'm not saying there's not imbalance, there is, but so many classes are viable in PvP, and so many naysayers just love to say, you can't balance PvP, it's inevitable, it's not the devs' fault, and I've always said bullshit, you know? They just don't want it to be balanced. It could be because of laziness. It could be because the old conspiracies that we used to have in WoW where they would purposely make certain things broken to make you re-roll that class or even keep playing if you already have the class at max, and then they would nerf you and they would do it to something else and then you would want to go for that and they'd get more sub money. I mean, that was always the conspiracy if you remember the forums back in the old days, man. Now, with all the negativity out of the way, once again, let's just make it very clear. The reputation grind, the tabards, that's one of the best things they've ever done. That made a game that was typically a boring grind like it was in BC for me turn into something that was actually a healthy grind, something I wanted to do, something where I could just do things that were fun, right? Do a dungeon, right? Actually get reputation for things in the dungeon. That was an incredibly good idea. The raiding, I think it was all just like a decent level of easy, but at the same time, I don't think any raid has ever been hard in WoW up until actually the worst days of WoW, right? Like you start getting into like post-Cataclysm raids and it actually does start to become hard, right? A lot of people, they really overblew the difficulty of vanilla and TBC and Wrath. I think a lot of people that played private servers knew that stuff wasn't really that hard, but when Classic and stuff was coming out, it was like, oh, wait till you get into AQ. It's like, dude, I literally could be on the toilet with my laptop with mad diarrhea and still beat every boss in top 5 on the DPS charts in AQ. It's just not that hard, right? So, and I'm not using a mouse in that example, by the way, so I don't know what to tell you, but what I can say is that Wrath of the Lich King has to be a current runner-up for best expansion. It's just one of the best of all times. I just don't think it's vanilla, obviously. It's just not. The world was basically dead, maybe not in its heyday, but certainly looking back at it and looking at how people play it now, it changes how I see the game because it makes it a little bit more real because people are playing it the way it's meant to be played in many ways, right? Because this is how people think it's supposed to be played, rather than people having no idea how to play like they did 10 years ago. So again, this could be changed. I might see myself doing something more like that later on once we talk about the other 6 expansions, but for now, Wrath is a runner-up to best expansion, Burning Crusade decent, and even after playing multiple iterations of Classic WoW, I don't think it's rose-tinted goggles. I think it's the best expansion of all time currently. But we are about to get to a whole new era of World of Warcraft, Cataclysm, where it changed the world, it changed everything about how we saw the game, and they started to remove, they were on their heyday, their beginnings of removing the ways that we used to see the game and adding new stuff. So for example, talents began to change. Not just talents, but abilities. We got Holy Power for Pally. You got these weird Soul Shard mechanics going going on for the Warlocks, right? Everybody had to have something unique. Hunters got focus, they no longer had mana, that was actually a good change. But so many things changed, but how about the expansion as a whole?
Burns through the cavernous deeps.
Cataclysm. Now, if you go through the history of World of Warcraft, you might remember that Cataclysm was not well liked, actually, even in its heyday. But here's the thing. I feel like the hate for Cata didn't really arrive until maybe the Deathwing patch. I mean, sure, lots of people did not like that they changed the world. I was one of them. I do not like Northern Barrens being separate from Southern Barrens. I think it's convoluted. I don't like the Barrens having green in it. I know the lore. I do. Except I just don't like it with Cataclysm. There's a reason it was the Barrens, right? I don't like North Stranglethorn Vale and South Stranglethorn Vale. I think it's just messy, and I know they wanted to make the zones bigger, and they certainly did, I feel like, but it just didn't feel good to me. And also, personally, in Cataclysm, for me, it felt like the world died, right? It felt like the world died. I leveled an Orc Mage when Cata came out. I leveled a High Elf, or actually a Blood Elf, sorry, Warrior. I thought that was fun. Those were new class combinations. I think new class combinations could be a good thing. Orc Mage is a little sus because they're not supposed to be too smart, but Blood Elf Warrior to me makes perfect sense. So, you know, they also added Tauren Pally though. Not a big fan of the Sunwalker. I don't think that when you break the lore that it's actually a good addition. I think it's only a good addition when it makes sense. Like they added Night Elf mages. I understand, but I also don't. If you know the lore, mages and Night Elf don't mix. They really don't like that. They understand the dangers, but when you get to Legion, and they're already kind of done with the Burning Legion, you know, being a threat, I understand why they might want to make a Night Elf mage, because a Night Elf might say, who cares? But back to Cataclysm, so I had some class things I did not like getting added to certain races. I had a lot of fun, personally, with a lot of the different dungeons in Cataclysm. Cataclysm had some of the best dungeons that I've ever done. I liked, like, it was almost like a time-walking dungeon. Like, you went back and you played through some of the original lore. You got some cool stuff. I mained a Feral back then. I was a pretty good Feral back then. I played almost every class to 85 except for like Priest. I can never level a Priest for some reason back then. And so I have a lot of fond memories on a personal level of Cataclysm. I understand the world-changing thing is a big part of Cataclysm, but if you take that out for a moment, because they did make everything streamlined, I just wish they streamlined it and kept the original world. That's what I wish they had done, right? The class changes had not quite gone over the deep end yet, but they were on their way, but they had not gone over the deep end yet. They added these interesting legendaries you could farm. Rogues could go for special daggers. I mained a rogue as well at that time, and I remember going for that. I mean, I did so much. I just don't think this was a bad expansion. I'm gonna say it was decent. To me, Cataclysm's a pretty good expansion. It's not the best, and people didn't like it in the beginning for pretty good reasons. I mean, obviously, the LFR patch wasn't very good, right? But I do feel like Blizzard had this phase for a while, and honestly, they've only recently kind of gotten over it. WoD was the worst example, where they would just take way too long between patches. People would just get bored, you know? And so I feel like you add the LFR patch, and then you add the convoluted Deathwing fight at the end, and yeah, nobody's gonna like that after waiting a while, but I do think it was a decent expansion. Okay, what do we got? We have, what came after this? Mr. Pandaria, yeah. I was a kid during this, and so you would think I'd be like, oh, I was a kid, right? I was like 17, 18 or whatever, and you could think to yourself, obviously, you must have been a part of the group that only hated it because they added pandas. But no, I was based back then. I knew that Pandaren were in Warcraft 3. I knew about Chen Stormstout. None of this surprised me. I don't know why it surprised so many people. I feel like they're dunces for that. Here's the thing. Pandas alone is a really dumb thing to hate about this expansion. The Pandaren were really cool in my opinion. I really think that the Mr. Pandaria land of Pandaria itself was beautiful. It was Asian themed, which you'd really never seen before in World of Warcraft. I think that it had a lot of good tropes to it. Now, we can get to the really big elephant in the room, right? Which is going to be basically Garrosh going evil, going rogue, getting corrupted by the Shah. What the hell the Shah even were to begin with as a little sussy to me as well. But, you know, Mr. Pandaria had some of the best PvP I've heard from you guys that any expansion's ever had. Now, I quit after like 2 months of Mr. Pandaria. I had lots of things going on. I was going into college, I had a life, I had other games I was playing, and so many people were being negative about it that did genuinely affect the way that I looked at the game. So, I did get to a point where I got to max level, farmed out some reputation with some different stuff. I went ahead and I got that disc mount. I remember farming for that, where the flying disc, right? Like that was just badass. And then I quit, right? But I heard a lot of good things about Mr. Pandaria, and even though a lot of adult people who were going way too hard into the panda thing, or a lot of edgy teens were like, whoa, you're copying Kung Fu Panda, they didn't like it. Honestly, this is one of the better expansions to ever exist. Based on what you guys have said, and based on what I remember, based on everything, and the fact that if I aggregate all of my knowledge of Mists, I really don't come out of it feeling negative I would have to say it's at least decent, right? It has to be on par with Cataclysm in that regard. Some people might put it as a runner-up, but we're going to talk about some other things, I think, that Mist is not as good of, and so I don't feel like it can be a runner-up. It also doesn't have nostalgia really built for it in that regard, but again, it is one of the better ones I think that have ever come out. So I think it was decent, and that's where I'm going to put it. Now, my friends, we get to the juicy expansions. This is probably the worst era of World of Warcraft history right here as a whole. Warlords of Draenor, bro. So
We will never be slaves!
what do they decide to do? Well, Garrosh goes rogue, and they've run out of content, right? So what they do is they go back in time. They let you go back to the original Draenor. They don't complete the expansion. They don't finish any of the places you get to go. They bring out some of the best leveling experiences of my entire time ever playing WoW, because I think that early leveling in Draenor, seeing Draenor, the nostalgia it brought out of somebody who knew the lore, that was extremely fun. I enjoyed this expansion in the beginning. I thought it was wonderful. Oh my god, did I think it was wonderful. And then I got to max level. When I got to max level in Warlords of Draenor, I genuinely hated the game, and I could not keep playing after the first patch. I heard from a lot of people, really, that the first patch was probably as good as it got, because it took so long to get to the second patch, or with the third or whatever, right? Like, it took so long between content cycles, and they didn't give us so much that it became a headache and a bore and a snore. And not just that, garrisons, I think, were really cool conceptually and just done incorrectly. You know, back then I had the phone app for my garrison and stuff like that. You could do garrison shit while you were in college. I was doing it while I was in class, right? I think that was the time. Could have been even high school. I think it was college. But the point is this, I didn't want, and I felt resentment about this, and other people did too, a phone game attached to my MMO. This was the expansion where some of their design decisions started to feel exploity and started to feel like they were caring more about money than anything else. Even though the art team is amazing, the sound team is amazing, as WoW tends to have, and that they really could have done one of the best jobs they've ever done by giving us Draenor, they fell short so badly. I mean, so badly, and the content cycles were so messed up that I cannot possibly say this was even an okay expansion. Now, my head says bad. A lot of people want to say the worst, though. Now, I want to say bad because, like I said, the leveling experience was good, but can I really give this bad just for the leveling experience? A lot of you guys said that, like, the raids were pretty good as well, even if they were few and far between. We might have to change this ranking, but overall, I would say Warlords of Draenor is easily the worst expansion that's ever come out in World of Warcraft history. It just messes up too much, you know. Like, also, they had terrible talents. I mean, it was like the beginning, really, of some of the shittiest things of all time. They just started with this idea of bonus objectives, this idea of not really a daily quest, not really a world quest. It kind of was, but it was almost there. It was like something that was like a literal prototype version of the modern world quest that you go out on Dragonflight and you see them all over the world. You get something for doing something out in the world. It had the prototype for that, but it wasn't as good. Often you just only killed stuff for them, and it was super boring. So definitely the worst expansion of all time. Not to mention the horrible lore. Now, right after Warlords of Draenor, we get the Redemption, right? The Redemption, which was Legion. So they went back in time. Then the Burning Legion says, what are you doing? Like, I never understood what the Burning Legion was doing this whole time. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, they really messed up with the lore so bad, really at Cataclysm. But I was literally editing and I was thinking to myself, did you not learn from what you did to Thrall and Cataclysm? Honestly, that alone might be good enough to just put Cataclysm at okay. Yeah, I think we're gonna end up changing that at the end, guys, because, like, that's actually messed up. Like, they ruined Thrall and Cataclysm. They made him like this weird freaking shaman-y type guy. I know he's a shaman, but he was unique for being a warrior shaman with honor, dude. And then Cairn dies. Oh my god, yes. All of this is horrible. So I'm gonna say some more stuff, but we are totally lowering this. Really, Mist of Pandaria should have came out after Wrath. They should have ditched the Deathwing saga, at least in the way that they decided to do it. Like, there's a lot of things you could have skipped to make a better version of WoW in some different alternate timeline that none of us get to experience, but Legion overall was a pretty damn good expansion, right? Like, my first thought is to put it under okay. Like, a lot of people might actually put Legion as a runner-up for best of all time. I do think that we're not looking at Legion properly, because Legion was, like, literally wedged between freaking Warlords of Draenor and then BFA. So when you have that and you're like, damn, yeah, Legion was really good. No, it wasn't. It was just wedged in between two piles of heaping dog shit. And so, of course, Legion's going to look better, because even before Warlords, you had Mists and you had Cata, which people were still iffy about, right? Even though I put them under decent, that's because I have all this hindsight to look at, right? Nobody had that back then. In many respects, people thought WoW was dying. I'll be honest, when Legion came out, maybe right before rather, I thought WoW was on its way out. I thought they were looking for a WoW 2 maybe, and they just kept going. It surprised all of us, I think. Now, Legion had extremely good Mythic Plus. It had an awesome world. It had a lot of really cool stuff in the Broken Isles. I thought it was incredibly fun to play. I think the Demon Hunter, they got a little lazy with the 2 spec and not the 3 spec, and I don't like the precedent they set there for the Evoker later on, but everybody wanted DH, right? Like, everybody thought Tinker was coming out at some point, DH for sure too. DH was really good. I didn't even mention DK for Wrath, but DK is a pretty good thing too. Like, I love the idea of a Death Knight in a video game, so that's also a pretty good thing, but the DH is an amazing addition. It's been OP, it's been a headache, it really ramped up mobility the way that Monks did in Mist of Pandaria, another class I forgot to mention, but Monk, again, it was kind of iffy when it came out. I literally mained Monk when it came out, and I don't remember it being special, but I think it ended up getting buffed after that. Again, I quit early into MoP, but the DH I also mained. That's a running theme with me. If it's a new class, I try to main it, and I think that it was just really fun. Now, Legion was the first expansion since Cataclysm that I did not immediately quit in the first couple months. I kept playing. I did Mythic Plus. Like I said, that's why I know that it was pretty fun, because I actually did it, and trust me, at this point of my life when Legion came out, I didn't play games anymore if they weren't genuinely fun. A lot of people keep playing a game because that's what they know, and they're hoping it's going to get better, and they cope. I was no longer on Copium by Legion. The last time I was on Copium was actually Cataclysm at best, right? I just don't do Copium anymore. I try not to, right? I mean, I won't lie, I did Copium on New World, but like, it's bound to hit me sometimes. But on WoW, they can't get me anymore, you know? The reason I'm saying Legion is okay and not decent, though, is because it's just really hard to rate it when it was segmented in between 2 garbage-ass expansions. On the overall, I think that Legion did a lot of things right, but I don't like that mobility went through the roof. I didn't like PvP in Legion personally. I thought the PvE was fun, but obviously they've iterated on it and it was a lot better. One thing I will tell you is that even though I thought the open world was pretty and the music was great, they did kill my boy, Varian. That was wrong. I don't know why you would do that. He died to a random troll. That's like actual garbage tier, like, storytelling. It wasn't a troll, it was a random demon, my bad. But I think like a troll died too. I think Vol'jin died, didn't he? Yeah, so like so many horrible things happened, and it was literally in just like the beginner trailer. It's like, what a garbage way to handle Varian. So they didn't do perfect. The lore was still in damage control. However, they had class halls. Class halls were really fun. They had artifacts. Artifacts were really good. I don't know. Can I really put Legion as okay? I think Legion is decent. I think Legion is decent. Yeah, actually, when I remember the class hall and I remember the artifact system going back to Dalaran, that was fun. Yeah, so I think that this is fair. If I say, is Legion as good as Mist of Pandaria, Cataclysm, or TBC? The answer is yes. If I say, is Legion better than those? I would say no. And if I had to say, is Legion as good as Wrath or Vanilla? No. There's no way, dude. It was way off the deep end by that point, but it was better than most of the crap Blizzard was putting out. So yeah, it was decent. But now we have BFA, which might also be one of the worst expansions of all time if Shadowlands didn't come after it. Now, I'm obviously very biased. I did actually play a lot of BFA, but I only played a couple months of Shadowlands at best. We'll start off with BFA, though. BFA turned Sylvanas into the new Garrosh. It was one of the worst expansions lore-wise that I've literally ever seen. In terms of it being beautiful and stuff with the music, once again, that's great, but the memes started to erupt a little bit before this expansion, where if the only thing you can say that is good about an expansion is the art and the music, it's not a good expansion. And so, yeah, you have like Dazara lore, and it's beautiful. I think the raid encounters were interesting. I think raiders really enjoyed this expansion more often than maybe some other people that were trying to enjoy the game in a more casual way. I didn't like the way combat felt. I distinctly remember maining a monk and maining a warrior and just feeling weak. I did not like island expeditions. I thought that was a terrible addition. I didn't enjoy PvP at all during this expansion at all. Some people did. I personally didn't. I do feel like most of the time when I was playing in BFA, I was bored. And if I'm completely honest with you, I would have to say BFA was just okay. It wasn't quite bad, you know what I mean? Because like, we're gonna get to what I think was bad, which personally, we'll just do it, is Shadowlands. I think Shadowlands was bad, but I think BFA was okay. I do think it was better than Shadowlands, but not by too much. Shadowlands for me just was not fun. Torghast looked like it was gonna be fun, but I ended up just getting super bored early on. I did not like the PvE. It really was just boring to me. There was nothing about queuing for a mythic or a dungeon that made me happy when I played Shadowlands. There was nothing about about the queuing for BGs or arenas that enticed me or made me have fun. I remember I mained a hunter during the beginning of this expansion. I really wanted to enjoy it. I really wanted to enjoy, let's say, Torghast once again, and I couldn't. The one thing that bored me the most about Shadowlands was, number one, the jailer lore. I hated the jailer lore. I thought it was cringe. Who the hell is this guy that's like secretly all over the place? Like, if you know WoW lore, it's gonna make you cringe. If you don't, you probably don't care, and that's why you're like, I don't know what the problem is. Trust me, there's a problem with the jailer. There's a problem with Sylvanas going rogue, really starting in BFA, getting really compounded in Shadowlands. You compound this in Shadowlands, and you have this lover boy story with Sylvanas and that human dead guy that used to just be some cringe guy you would kill in the Plaguelands, and now apparently he has like a place. The only good thing about Shadowlands was not even Shadowlands. It was actually the BFA cinematic. Like, that was it. And I know that has nothing to do with Shadowlands, but the reason I say that is because in the BFA cinematic, you got to really see what Sylvanas was like, and that's one of the reasons, really, that BFA gets okay. The cinematic was one of the best they've ever created, but that's when you really think to yourself, okay, if freaking Sylvanas is the baddie in Shadowlands, at least she's a baddie, you feel me? At least she's a real baddie in every way, you know? And so there's that, but that had nothing to do with Shadowlands itself. It kind of like set up in the BFA expansion. So I just think Shadowlands was shit. I really do. Like, I think it was really bad. Now, I admit, when it comes to Shadowlands, Warlords of Draenor, and let's see, maybe a little bit of BFA, I have less experience playing those compared to these top 6 where I have a lot of experience playing them. You could say that's correlation as to why I put the ones I've played up here and the ones I played less down here, but I could say I only didn't play these as much because they were shit to me, and I played these more because they were good. And that's basically where I think we are right now. You have a bunch of crap that's basically about mid. You have some really good stuff that's never coming back and in its heyday has been ruined, like Classic WoW and Wrath Classic, so there's that. And then you have meh, like just meh stuff at the bottom that we've all just put up with. That's why you can see why people were down on WoW, right? This is why private servers blew up, because BFA was okay, but we just experienced a bunch of like decent / garbage that came out, like worst of all time as well, and bad that came right after. And so overall, I think this is like as good as it gets.
2 hours later.
Okay, so we ended up amending this, right? I just was editing the video, listening to what I had to say, new things came to my mind, and overall, I said that, yeah, Cataclysm, because of some bad stuff with the lore that we actually did talk about, yeah, I'd have to boost this down to an okay. I don't think it was bad. It wasn't like, I mean, I don't know. I think it's okay. You could tell me what you think, though. TBC, the only reason it gets decent over some of these other ones, even though realistically I don't think it was a good expansion, is because it was the original version of WoW, and it just gets to benefit from all the things that makes these 2 expansions actually good, you know what I mean? Whereas in a lot of these middle expansions, it felt like they were winging it. It was so unfun to me. And you know, the PvE was not very great in TBC, but for a PvE player, it had to have been better than vanilla, right? Because you actually had things to grind for. So it might not have been my jam. I might have thought it was boring, but I have to admit that PvE was probably more fun having heroic dungeons to play in and stuff overall compared to like vanilla. So if you have to take the trilogy into account, I would have to say you'd have to do it like that. So that's it. I mean, the only real ones you could look at once again is maybe putting Kata right there, maybe putting TBC right there, but I think that that's not fair to me. So as I mentioned to you guys earlier, I ultimately capitulated and I just decided to drop Cataclysm down to okay. Now for Dragonflight, as of right now, because of course things could change, and I still enjoy the game, this is a big deal, I would say I would currently put Dragonflight under runner-up, which is why it's such a big deal right now. Dragonflying is amazing. I'm actually playing Dragonflight over Wrath Classic. That has to say something. The PvP is not perfect, but it's so much better than anything I've experienced in the last 3 or 4 expansions. The PvE is fun. My only gripe is I don't understand why the Mythic Plus system would not include all of the new dungeons at first, and then cycle in the old ones in the second season or whatever, right? I don't get that, because why would you release it just for somebody, like for example, the Knoll dungeon, right? I've done it like once or twice ever, maybe 3 times, but I would like to do that more. I know it's a bad example because it's probably the worst dungeon, but you guys see what I'm saying. I want to do the new stuff, but that's my only real gripe. I mean, I played that first raid that came out. The raid was fun. Is this subject to change though? Of course, because if the content doesn't come in good, if we discover new things about it that make the balance less good in PvP, if everything gets stale, then I could easily see Dragonflight going just to decent with the rest of the decent, you know, mid-level crap, or just even okay if they really botch it. But in its current iteration, something I could not say for the last 4 expansions if I was doing a tier list, I would say Dragonflight is actually a runner-up for the best expansion of all time. It won't be the best, no matter what, but it might be Wrath level, which I think is a big deal. So anyway, guys, let me know in the comment section below what you think. Where would you put everything? Where do you agree or disagree with me? But I'll see you guys in the next video. Mcdoubles out.